Welcome to the most painful cave deaths ever. Let's get into it. At first, welcome to Nutty Putty Cave in Utah, United States. Fun fact, the guy who discovered this cave actually wanted to name it Silly Putty. Yeah, like the stuff you squish and stretch when you're bored in class. But eventually he was like, maybe let's make it sound slightly more unhinged. And boom, Nutty Putty was born. Spoiler alert, it lives up to the name. It's nutty, it's putty. And it's definitely not silly. The tragical and deadliest accident in this place led to the closure of itself permanently, even though there were several attempts to reopen it. Meet John Edward Jones, 26 years old, husband, father, med student, and a guy with a very adventurous Thanksgiving plan. John and his brother Josh went caving on November 24, 2009, and they headed to the Nutty Putty Cave. It was supposed to be a casual adventure, but John took a wrong turn, literally, and ended up headfirst in the tightest and narrowest place. That's not a passageway, that's a life decision. Around 8 p.m., John thinks he's crawling into the birth canal, a well-known narrow passage. In fact, he wasn't. Instead, he heads into a super tight tunnel called Ed's Push, 10 inches high, 18 inches wide, at a 70-degree angle. That's not a passage, that's a human USB port. John slips headfirst into the passage. He gets stuck, really stuck, can't turn around, can't go forward, and he's nearly upside down for over 24 hours. His brother Josh finds him first, tries to pull him out, prays with him, then come the rescuers, working for over 27 hours in a space barely big enough to breathe in. There's one moment of hope. They manage to pull him out 10 inches using a complex rope and pulley system. But then the rope system fails. He slides right back in. John stays calm during the rescue. He talks, he prays, he sings hymns. He talks about his family. He knows he might not make it, and somehow he still brings peace to everyone around him. As time wore on, John's condition steadily deteriorated. Trapped head first in a vertical shaft just 10 by 18 inches wide, his body was pushed to its absolute limits. Breathing became more difficult. His organs began to feel the weight of compression. Muscle cramps set in, and every passing hour worsened the toll. The position he was stuck in caused blood to rush continuously to his head, elevating intracranial pressure and placing immense strain on his heart and lungs. This was not just discomfort, it was slow, unrelenting physical torture. But even more powerful than the physical suffering was the emotional weight. John was a young husband, a devoted father. As he lay there hour after hour, he spoke often of his wife and his young daughter, longing to see them again, but knowing he might not. And through it all, he showed an unshakable strength of spirit, fully aware of what laid ahead, yet holding fast to faith and connection. Eventually, on 25th of November at 11:52 p.m., his heart, under relentless pressure from the inverted and compressed position, gave out. John Edward Jones went into cardiac arrest and passed away deep within the cave. John's passing was devastating, not just for his family, but for everyone involved in the rescue. When efforts to recover his body were deemed too dangerous, a heartbreaking decision was made. The cave was permanently sealed. Nutty Putty would never be explored again. Now a tomb, and a painful reminder of the risks hidden beneath the surface. Okay, first we talked about Nutty Putty Cave, basically the worst place on earth to get stuck. But what if I told you there was another cave, one that tried to swallow 13 people whole? And this time, they weren't alone. They were a soccer team. June 23, 2018. The Wild Boar soccer team, boys aged 11 to 16, and their 25-year-old coach go exploring in Thailand's Tham Luang Nang Non cave after practice. Nothing unusual, just boys being boys, until Mother Nature hit the flood cave button. Rainwater comes pouring in fast. The exit floods, and just like that, they're trapped. 2.5 miles inside, no light, no Wi-Fi, absolute darkness. The boys do what they can. They climb to higher ground from the floodwater, conserve their flashlight batteries, ration snacks, meditate. Honestly, more survival instinct than half of us on a group project. Meanwhile, rescue team arrives. Thai Navy SEALs, divers, and international experts, they all gathered. It's time to go. For 9 days, the world watches and waits. And then on July 2nd, British divers Rick Stanton and John Volanthen emerge from the flooded dark and say, "We found them. All 13 are alive." They were alive, huddled on a rock, exhausted, scared, but still there. Now the real question, how do you get 13 people out of a submerged cave? through tight pitch-black passages just some 15 inches wide. Rescue teams plan fast. They send in food, blankets, lights, even teaching diving basics, but the clock's ticking. Monsoon rains are coming again. Then tragedy strikes. On July 6, Saman Kunan, a former Thai Navy SEAL, dies from oxygen deprivation after delivering air tanks. A hero, lost while trying to save others. It was a wake-up call. This rescue was as dangerous as it was urgent. July 8 to 10, the operation begins. Each boy was sedated to stay calm. Each was escorted by expert divers. Step by step, breath by breath, they navigate the impossible. And on July 10, all 13 are out. They're all safe. The world can exhale. The rescue took nearly 10,000 people, 100 divers, over 700 oxygen tanks, helicopters, soldiers, and 1 literal billion liters of pumped-out water. It wasn't just a mission, it was a miracle. Sadly, the cost was real. In December 2019, another SEAL, Beirut Pakpara, died from a blood infection contracted during the operation. So hey, maybe skip the cave next week and try bowling or just literally anything without the risk of monsoon-induced doom. And maybe pack extra snacks, just in case. Okay, next let me ask you this question. Have you ever noticed how caves and mines are basically the Earth's way of saying, "Welcome to my dark, claustrophobic maze of doom"? Yeah, turns out when humans go spelunking or digging for treasure, aka coal, things can go really wrong. Turkey's mining safety record? Let's just say it's giving oops all disasters. In fact, over 3,000 miners had already died in Turkey since 1941, even before the disaster we're about to talk about. Spoiler, it's worse than any of them. This led to the fatal destiny of more than 300 miners. May 13, 2014, 3:10 p.m. Soma, Turkey. An explosion erupts deep in a coal mine, caused by an electrical fault that triggered a fire. Coal dust basically turned the place into a flamethrower. Toxic gases, especially carbon monoxide, filled the tunnels. The power cut out. Emergency lighting failed, and over 780 miners were trapped underground, in the dark with fire and poison. 301 people were gone. Most from carbon monoxide poisoning. Some were found clutching wet rags to their faces, a desperate move, hoping it might filter the gas. But it didn't. The deaths weren't fast. They were slow, suffocating, and terrifying. Miners felt the dizziness, nausea, confusion, fully aware of what was happening. Some even wrote farewell messages on walls or on their own clothes. Imagine hearing your coworkers dying in the dark beside you and knowing you're next. That's what happened down there. And while the physical suffering was unbearable, the emotional weight was just as crushing. Thousands of families shattered, kids lost their dads, whole communities thrown into mourning. And the worst part, it didn't have to happen. One politician literally said, "Death is the fate of miners." And people were like, "Excuse me? What?" Cue the outrage. Protests swept the nation. People demanded justice, safety returns, anything to stop this from happening again. A few officials were tried and convicted for negligence, but many felt justice never really arrived. The Soma mine disaster wasn't just a freak accident, it was the result of a broken system that saw human lives as expendable. Being trapped underground is one of the most terrifying ways to suffer, and too often, those lives are lost not to nature, but to neglect. Please, if your job is literally digging into the earth, the bare minimum you deserve is to come back out. So far, we've been deep underground in Turkey, where coal mines turn into gas chambers. We followed rescue missions through flooded caves in Thailand, and we've watched as lives were lost to silence, darkness, and poor safety. This time, welcome to Michigan, 1926, land of lakes, lumberjacks, and apparently, minds held together with sheer optimism. Imagine working a regular Tuesday shift, and suddenly the ceiling says, "Surprise, water feature!" And then you're buried under 500 million gallons of mud and water. No explosion, no warning, and just a sudden roar. That was over in minutes, but left scars for generations. It was one of the deadliest mining disasters in the US history. 1 man survived, 51 didn't. November 3, 1926, Ishpeming, Michigan. 51 men descend into the Barnes Hecker iron mine for what should have been a totally normal shift. Miners, dads, uncles, a couple of teenagers, just trying to earn a living. But then, at 11:30 a.m., an enormous sound roared. The mine collapses after a hidden underground cavity. basically nature's water balloon, bursts open. 500 million gallons of sludge come crashing down. Within minutes, the mine is completely flooded. Mud, water, debris swallowing everything in sight. All 50 men lost their lives. Some were crushed instantly, others drowned in the pitch black, choking on clay. It was fast for some, painfully slow for others. Only one man made it alive. He escaped by climbing straight up a vertical shaft within 800 feet in 14 minutes, with the flood tightly chasing right behind him like an Asian level of climbing games. The aftermath? Absolutely brutal. Whole families were shattered. 130 kids lost their dads. Some lost both dads and older brothers. And here's the kicker. Most of the bodies were never recovered, just sealed inside the mine forever. And as if it couldn't get worse, turns out this disaster was totally preventable. No warning, no surveying for water hazards, no criminal accountability. And were the company held accountable? Nah. No one went to jail, no massive payout. The Cleveland Cliffs company shrugged and kept on pushing. Mining safety in the early 1900s was basically just, don't die, good luck. And if you did die, your family got thoughts and prayers and maybe a sack of potatoes. The mine was permanently sealed, still attuned to this day. And while the disaster did lead to a minor safety reform, real change came way too slow for 50 lives lost underground. And now we've arrived at the final stop on our very cursed mining tour. Last but definitely not least, because Mount Mulligan said, why just collapse when you can explode and obliterate everything in a 30-kilometer radius? This one's got it all. Coal dust, open flames, and a complete disregard for basic science. And it's like lighting a birthday candle inside a firework factory and calling it safe. Welcome to Mount Mulligan, 1921 edition, one of Australia's deadliest coal mining disasters, where 75 men and boys never made it out, and a whole town's life changed in seconds. October 19th, 1921. A regular morning in far north Queensland, Australia. 75 men and boys headed into the Mount Mulligan coal mine. Then at 9:25 a.m., a massive explosion ripped through the mine. So loud, people heard it 30 kilometers away. The cause? A detonation in an area filled with dry coal dust. And they were using open flame lanterns in a coal mine. Now here's the part that hits the hardest. All 75 men and boys working underground that morning were instantly killed. The explosion didn't just destroy the mine, it launched timber and debris straight out of the shaft entrance like it was trying to break the sound barrier. Rescue efforts kicked off immediately, but the mine, it was chaos. Toxic gases were everywhere, the passages were destroyed, and the whole place was one bad breath away from a full-on collapse. No one made it out. 75 lives gone in an instant, and with them, the soul of Mount Mulligan. No fathers, no brothers, no sons. Just empty homes and broken hearts. And because this was 1921, there was no compensation system, no GoFundMe, no safety net. Women were left widowed with children and zero support. The town's economy? Obliterated. So, what did the powers that be do? They launched a royal commission. Classic, let's investigate the obvious move. Eventually, and we do mean eventually and slowly, some real changes came through. Ban on gunpowder in coal mines, mandatory safety lamps, actual ventilation and dust control, because apparently, don't fill the air with flammable death wasn't obvious before. Today, a memorial stands at the site. It doesn't bring them back, but it makes sure we don't forget. And that, folks, was a deep dive, literally and emotionally, into some of the deadliest mining disasters in history. From Soma to Barntecker, from Mount Mulligan to Tham, Luang, and beyond. These stories weren't just about mines blowing up. They missed the memo on basic safety. They were about real people, workers just trying to make a living, who paid the price for someone else's shortcuts. Mines may be underground, but the grief, the aftermath, they stayed on the surface. Families torn apart, towns never the same. And yeah, a lot of safety laws changed after each disaster, but why does it always have to take tragedy for people in charge to start caring? So if there's a takeaway here, besides never work in a sketchy mine, it's this: speak up, question authority, push for better working conditions wherever you are. Because history doesn't have to repeat itself just because capitalism has a short attention span. And that's a wrap on today's wild ride through history's most shocking mining disasters. Well, that was definitely a wild ride. Who knew coal mines could have that much drama, right? Now, if you thought today was insane, just wait till next time. We're stepping into the world where thing goes way too far, and let's just say people got way too excited with their experiments. So buckle up, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the bell, cause next time, it's about to get so weird, you'll be like, is this real? Yeah, it is.